I know you've been asked this a few different times, but you're only 2 weeks away from the game now. Are you seeing exactly what you need to see to know that these guys are ready to go?
Well, yeah, I think so. They're playing with great confidence. They're playing with great energy. And I think what Jim's done a really good job of is, you have your whole offense or your whole defense, but then you figure out what areas fit the guys that you have. And this is a different group than he had the previous stop and previous years. So I think he's recognized some things that maybe he had a little bit differently at Oklahoma State than he has here, and he's tailored the scheme to that, which is great. It's much a challenge on offense, and so I don't know what percentage you would have in. I think I'd say most of it's probably in, but where do you spend the majority of your focus? And that's just like on offense. When we had JT, it was a lot different than Justin, and Justin a lot different than CJ and Dwayne. So that's the sign of a good college football coach.
And then you had talked about, and a couple others had talked about the cornerbacks and safeties being a little banged up. Do you feel like you're back to where you guys need to be right there, with 2 weeks into the game?
Yeah, I mean, we had a good practice today, coming out of the weekend. So the goal is to be at full force heading into next week's practice, and overall, feel good about it.
Fourth row middle, Patrick Murphy, 24/7 Sports.
Ryan, you've made kind of your thoughts on the transfer portal and the policy you guys have pretty clear, but with kind of the situations with guys getting banged up and whatnot, do you guys discuss as a staff how to maybe reevaluate that, both in terms of going into the portal to get guys, but also keeping guys in the program that maybe could have helped you after they left after last season? Is that something you guys talk about regularly given the situation?
Every year you have 85 scholarships, and you have 110 guys in preseason camp, and you just make sure that the numbers are right. And so every year it's a balance to figure out what that mixture is of guys. How many guys are kind of a starter level, backup level, and then usually some guys who are developmental. And then there's situations where you need someone to step in and fill a hole. There's typically the way that we've done it. When you look at Trey Sermon and Jonah Jackson, some of the guys that we've had. It was great to have Tanner come in because we didn't really have a lot of depth at nickel, and so now he and Cam are there, and that's really good. So that's typically the way we've addressed it, and we were, I think, at almost 90 guys going into the spring, so we were 5 over. And we knew that because you knew that that along the line there's going to be some attrition, and when you have some position battles, that happens. And very pleased with the 85 that we have on, some really good young players and some really talented guys with experience.
Third row right, Rob Aller, Columbus Dispatch.
Ryan, you've done this a long time, and there's a lot of changes on defense. What's it like going into that first game, being pretty confident on what you're going to see, but not certain? I guess it's like practice range in golf, taking it to the course.
Yeah.
Is there similarity there?
Yeah. I mean, anytime you go into that first game, guys kind of tweak some things on both sides of the ball, and when you have different players, you want to utilize their talents, and again, that's the key to a good college football coach. You can't pick up anybody off of waivers or really draft anybody exactly the way you want. You got to recruit guys, and a lot of times you're recruiting the best players available within reason. I mean, you want guys that fit your scheme, but you're not just going to pass up on a great player. And so, I mean, when you go into that first game, there's going to be adjustments year in, year out based on your personnel. So there's a time where you have to have contingency plans in place for the first game.
Is there such a thing as a gamer too? A guy that's a okay practice player, but then the lights come on and you don't know that until the game? And how long does it take to really know a guy is a guy?
Yeah, well, we try to do that as much as we can in practice. We try to simulate the games as much as possible. It's not that easy. We have a spring game where we have a crowd in there. We're in the shoe. We've been in the stadium several times now. And you don't know, I guess, that you're in that game, but we try to do the best we can to simulate a game and get an idea of what's going on. But it is true. I mean, even when we go into the stadium for scrimmages, sometimes you see things that you're like, we haven't seen that in 5 practices, and then all of a sudden you see it. And then the more they do it, the more comfortable they are in that environment. So that's why we try to make practice as close as we can to the game, and even harder maybe sometimes.
Have you ever seen guys not play up to what you thought they'd be because the lights are so bright, or not?
What we say is, you're gonna play in high pressure, high stressful environments to the level of your training. And if you think about some of the great players who are quote unquote clutch, some of those guys, when you look at their numbers in those clutch environments, they were actually average. They did average, and so all you have to do is trust your training in those moments. Now there are some guys who overthink it and struggle, and get themselves all worked up, but that's part of the process of learning to play and growing up. But there is a lot of pressure on everybody, and we talk about a lot that the pressure should be felt during the week. And if you put a lot of pressure on yourself Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, then you shouldn't feel the pressure on Saturday. It's like going into a test unprepared. If you don't know the information, yeah, you're going to be nervous and sweating in the back row. But if you know the stuff cold and you walk in, and you're not as nervous anymore. So we really try to stress that the middle of the week is where you should feel the most pressure.
Second row left, Stephen Means, Cleveland.com.
Right. If you get quarterbacks in here during the camp, watching what Ford was watching, what specific traits, if any, are you looking at? I know everybody has their own thing.
Yep.
Are there certain things that you need to see in order to feel like they can play there?
Yeah. I mean, when you're evaluating quarterbacks, first off, there's the physical traits. So, your size, the movement, the accuracy, those types of things. Then there's the next kind of thing you're looking at is spatial intelligence, spatial awareness. In terms of the accuracy and understanding body language, being able to have some awareness and see different things. Some guys, we call them like carnival quarterbacks. They could go and throw the ball into a big tire 100 times in a row. But once those things start moving, they can't anticipate. So I think that spatial intelligence and awareness is really good. Being able to read body language, certainly leadership and the way that they carry themselves is very, very important. And then the ability to use mistakes as feedbacks to learn, because you're going to fail. This game and quarterback play is you're constantly failing. But if you can learn from those mistakes and continue to grow and have that growth mindset, then that allows you the chance to keep building. When you look at the best quarterbacks who have played in this game and the guys who play in the NFL, they've all gone through those types of things, adversity. They've learned from mistakes. They've had setbacks in their career, and they grow from them and they get stronger. And so I think when you kind of look at somebody in a whole, there's all those pieces that come with it. And that's what we look for.
And because of how that position is set up, when you just want to be able to 8 to 15 times a year, so are there things that maybe you just don't know until you finally put them on the field, and are those things pretty consistent regardless of who the quarterback is?
Yeah, I mean, you can anticipate pretty good in practice and start to see things and patterns and trends, but until you're in the fire with somebody, you really don't quite know.
Front row right, Austin Ward.
From wherever.
Hearts are.
Do you have any concern level with those cornerbacks specifically about their availability for next week at this point? We know Cam just been on the pitch now. Izzo make up a little bit, and then Jordan. I know those aren't long term, but how concerned are you about that position?
No, I mean, I feel like we're going to be at full strength going into that first game, and majority of those guys had really good springs. They did miss a couple guys missed a couple things here, but that's kind of training camp, and the goal is to have everybody there at full strength going into really next week. So we have a full week of practice starting next Monday, but this week's going to be a good one too. I mean, we're decent shape.
You had to jump up and get you a corner specifically from Minnesota last year. If JK or Jair have to jump in there, how have their camps been? Because I assume they've been getting maybe more workload than you anticipated.
They have. I think both of those guys have practiced their tail off, and they're going every day up against Mara and Jackson and Mecca and Julian, and so I give them a lot of credit. I mean, they're out there every day. They've gotten better, both of those guys, and sometimes it's hard for them to see that, but they are. They've gotten much better, and again, it goes back to what you see in practice, what you're going to see in a game. If they just keep grinding on these days, then they're going to find themselves in games really fast, and you try to figure out who's game ready right now, and they're getting real close.
If the camp portion of this month is over, what is this specific week then?
Yeah.
What's the goal here?
Notre Dame is next week, and then that's where the focus goes. But then this week, same thing. Trying to classes start tomorrow for us, so getting into the rhythm of that and coming in the afternoons. But start to introduce some of the Notre Dame stuff, but stay locked in on fundamentals and discipline, and still do some good on good.
Third row left, Bill Landis, Rivals.
Ryan, I know you guys here have the luxury of being able to play a lot of guys if you want to, just because of the way the talent is. But I'm thinking of the beginning of last year, where you were just playing so many guys on defense. Was there anything learned in those 2 games that you know, the lines of you're playing a quality opponent week 1? Let's find our 11 to 15 guys and put them on the field and not worry about running guys out there like we were last year.
Well, I think now we have a better feel for who guys are and where they are in their careers. They have experience, and you know, going into last year, because of the whole COVID thing, certainly all the linebackers were green. And same thing with a couple of the safeties and up front. And it was a really an experienced group. This year, a little bit different. So I think we have a better feel for where everybody's at, and you know, guys will start to build some roles. But I do think that, you know, you still have to ask yourself, you know, is this person game ready for this first game? Are we going to trust him to put him in the game? If the answer is yes, then we'll still have some guys play multiple guys play the position. But I think, to your point, it won't nearly be as much as last year.
Does a new defense complicate that at all, in the sense that, you know, if there are 2 backers and there are 3 safeties who really have it down, and maybe behind them is close, not quite there yet, but this is new, looking you guys under to know the new defense?
Yes. But I also think that there are multiple personnel groupings, and it allows guys to grab onto some roles more than we've had in the past.
Right behind him, Jacob Bench, the lantern.
Yeah, hey Ryan, just going back to talking about quarterbacks and stuff, you know, talking before Dennis and CJ Stroud last week, they talked about their relationship with each other. Just from what you see with them, how does Corey and CJ work together in year 2 for CJ to start? How do you evaluate that?
Yeah, no, I think they have a great relationship, have since recruiting, and I think that CJ really grown in terms of his leadership this year, and just has a much more you know, wide perspective on everything that's going on, not just, you know, his job. He sees it almost as a coach right now, and so that's important. You know, I know his number one thing is he wants to win, you know, and everything else is secondary, and he's practiced that way.
And then maybe a little bit away from the field a little bit. Last week, Big Ten reached a new media deal and whatnot. Just you know, what were your thoughts on that with the new media partners? What kind of does it mean for the Big Ten? Just in your eyes.
I think it's exciting, and I think that you know, everybody involved has done an unbelievable job, and you know, I certainly just focus on the team and in the middle of preseason camp, not really talking much about that, but Gene called me up right away, and obviously very excited about some of the things that are coming down the road for us. So it has been a very exciting month for the Big Ten.
Front row middle, Dave Biddle, 24/7 Sports.
Hi Ryan, you mentioned scholarships earlier, but I think you indicated you might be at 85. I could be wrong, by my count, you guys are 2 under without Parker Lewis and 1 under with him. Is that maybe did a walk-on get bumped up to scholarship like a Xavier Johnson, or is my count just wrong?
No, we're at 85.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd have to go back and look to see exactly who that is, but yeah, we are at 85.
Did a walk-on recently get bumped up?
It may have been a little bit further back than that, but yeah,
Okay, was it Xavier?
I can't say.
Okay, gotcha. And then, what was Evan Pryor's role gonna be? And do you need someone to fill that role, or is it now, because CJ kind of indicated when we asked about it, really it's gonna be just Travion and mine are gonna have bigger roles, not bigger, we're gonna have bigger roles. Is that kind of how it's gonna be, or do you need somebody to kind of step into that role that Evan was gonna have?
Well, yeah, quite honestly, we've been very impressed with Dallin. I think Dallin Hayden has really come on. You know, he's been drinking through a fire hose this preseason camp, and he's had ups and downs, but I gotta tell you, he's got a lot of talent, and he's our 3rd running back right now, and he deserves it. He's played really hard. He's had his black stripe taken off, and so, you know, if he continues to grow, then we're gonna trust putting him in the game. We had a couple. We had one day full where Chip came over and did some running back, and boy, he's natural, and he's doing a great job at linebacker as well. So he'll be a guy that we could use as rain insurance if we needed him to. But you know, just seeing him live and in color, I mean, he's a talented running back. So been very impressed with the way he's playing at linebacker as well. But you know, we can also use him in a dual role if needed. But right now, Dallin will be the 3rd running back, and again, been very impressed with his camp. You know, for a freshman to step in like this, and you know, he's going to use this as an opportunity now that Evan's down.
3rd row left, Dan Holt, 11 Warriors.
Ryan, I know Cam Babb's been in and out of practice with some injuries. Just what's his status right now?
Yeah, he's he had a setback, but not a setback that's going to cost him the whole year. So he's out for a little while, and we're hoping to get him back here in a couple weeks.
So do you have like a timeline of when you think possibly you can do that?
Yeah, again, hoping in a couple weeks that he gets back out in the field. But his situation is very unique because of his background and his history. So we're just going to trust the doctors on it, kind of see where that goes. But hoping to get him back on the field.
Basically, you have to be extra cautious because of his history.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, we're going to be smart.
Front row right, Joey Kaufman, Columbus Dispatch.
Ryan, wondering what you've seen this offseason from how that compares to development coming from that Rose Bowl and rebuilding the camp.
Yeah, I mean, about what you would hope for. If you said, okay, here's what you'd like to see out of Tommy in the spring, in the preseason, and now heading into the year, about what you'd expect. Leadership, toughness, productivity. Just kind of a quarterback on the field right now. A guy that obviously gained a lot of experience last year and is playing pretty high level.
For him to be kind of the quarterback, the middle linebacker, he's learning new defense as well. Seems like he's handled that well. Why do you think that is?
I just think he's a very intelligent player. He's got a lot of competitiveness and toughness, and he likes the X's and O's of the game, but just has a great feel. Some guys have can just diagnose plays at a high level, and he can't, and he can process high levels of information too. So when you combine all those things, then you have a really good player.
Right behind Joey, Nathan Baird, Cleveland.com.
CJ last week was talking about how much his anticipation and things like that have improved, and you were talking about how he sees the field as a coach now. Just curious, how do you sort of push him now in this second year? And is that something we're kind of looking forward to, like how you could try to challenge him up to a higher level this offseason?
Well, I think it's just the daily grind and the daily push to get better and to figure out what he needs to improve on, what our offense needs to improve on, and every day is a work in progress, across the board. So it's just putting one foot in front of the other, and hopefully at the end of the entire preseason camp, he's gotten better, he's improved. So there's not one area that we're saying, hey, you got to get better in this one area. It's just across the board. The more you play, the better you are.
Is there something about him that takes to those sort of challenges better, either holding himself accountable or just wanting that sort of outside pressure to get in there?
I mean, he's just so highly competitive, and he's just driven. He wants it really, really bad, and he's in terms of that drive and that want to, and you combine that with his intelligence and his ability. One of the more special young men I've been around in a long time.
Just to clarify on chip training, that's you're looking at more like an emergency situation, just having in your back pocket.
You got it.
Second row left, Steve Hellwagon, 24/7 Sports.
Hey, Coach, I had a question from a fan, wanted to know, returning players, the guys who were with you last year to this point today, who are a couple guys who've just really come on, that are gonna be part of the plan this year that maybe didn't get to play last year, or, had a lesser role?
I think at the tight end position, I've just been very impressed with Cade Stover and Mitch Rossi. These are two guys that put their time in here and have really had good camps, very productive camps. At tight end, you have to, do a lot of stuff. You got to block. You have to protect. You have to run routes. I mean, there's a lot that is asked of you, and I've been really impressed with those two guys in particular. Trying to think of another guy who's been around. Julian Fleming's had a very good camp, had a really good summer. Been impressed with him. Who else? I'd say those two guys probably jump out a little bit on offense. On defense, I think you kind of know the guys. I think that we're hoping Teron Vincent can really take the next step. He's had a really good camp, and solidify some things inside for us. So he's been a bright spot for sure. I think most of the guys, Ronnie Hickman's, these guys played, so it's not like there's any surprise there, but he's had a very solid camp.
Don't want to get into your freshman a big head, but 2 weeks in, are there one or two of them that sitting here today, or one will be on the field first?
I learned my lesson by saying that. My phone will be buzzing by the time I walk through that door. I might pick out any freshman, so. No comment.
Deep left, Brendan Gulick, Buckeyes Now, Sports Illustrated.
Hey, Coach. We're going to have a chance to talk with Coach Hartline later this week on receivers. It's obviously a room that gets a ton of attention for good reason. Specific, though, to Coach Hartline, what is his greatest asset to you? What is the strongest thing he brings to your program?
It's funny you say it, because I think every year it changes. I think when he first got thrust into the role of wide receiver coach. He took it on and ran with it. I think the first thing is, he played here. He walked in these hallways. He wore, the block O. He played in the shoe. He's done it. And so that gives him instant credibility here and can relate well with the players. But then he went on and played and had a good career in the NFL, which, again, gives him more credibility. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean he's going to make a good coach. And I think, making that transition from player to coach for some guys is easier than others. And he's really made that transition well. I've challenged him with, how can you really take the next step as a coach and look at it from a wider lens, understanding protections and the run game and how the protections match up with the route structures. And he's really taken to running. He's really embraced all of that. And so, his recruiting obviously speaks for itself, but I think, he's become a more complete coach and he's continuing to do that. And I'm hoping that, pays dividends for us this season.
How about Kyle McCord's development? I mean, he's not going to get a chance to see a ton of snaps, it's most likely this year. How comfortable and confident are you with his growth and his ability to, at any point, get in there and not skip the beat offensively?
Yeah, he's made strides. He's done some really good things, and we need to continue to do those things. We need to keep growing and keep building, because it's one thing, do it in practice, another thing to do it in the game. And so I talked to him the other day. It's hard to be the guy. It's one snap away. Sometimes you feel like you literally are one snap away, but you feel like you're not going to see the field for another year. And you can't have that. You can't have that approach. You have to look at it like I'm going to be in the second play of the Notre Dame game. So, I think that's the biggest challenge for someone like Kyle. But he's made some improvements. It was really close to being a champion in the last scrimmage. So he's got to keep building and keep grinding, and he knows the areas that he has to improve on. But he's one snap away.
Deep center field, play hall, WSYX.
Ryan, do you feel like you have a handle on Notre Dame, maybe defensively because of Marcus, what he did at UC and Notre Dame?
And every year it's a different story, different journey, and that's a new defensive staff there. So
yeah.
they'll have different backgrounds that they're going to bring to the table, and all very, very good coaches. I worked for Al Golden at Temple and know him, and certainly have a tremendous amount of respect for him. And Marcus has obviously great history of being a defense coordinator, and so there's a lot of good minds in that room, and they'll be well coached and have a really good scheme.
I talked to Laurinaitis up at Notre Dame. I was just curious if, and maybe it's a matter of timing or personal preference, did he ever discuss an opportunity here?
Yeah, we talked about it, and James certainly has an unbelievable football background, and got an unbelievable amount of respect for him, not only for what he did here at Ohio State, but his NFL career. And he's another tremendous coach, on their staff, and so again, it's going to be a challenge, but yeah, a ton of respect for him.
From our right, Tim May, Letterman Row.
Thank you, Jerry. Speaking of carnival quarterbacks, did you win Nina a lot of dolls and stuff?
No, not so much.
I just like that term. CJ the other day was talking about the meetings he has with you and stuff, and I'm just wondering, it's rare that you've had a second-year starting quarterback. Can you discuss or talk about those meetings, what level you're on with him from the standpoint of what kind of joy that even brings for you to be talking more and more big-time football?
Yeah, well, I think we used to say, you have to equate the room where, you have, in that room, you have Devin, you have Kyle, and you have CJ, and they're all 3 different years and 3 different levels of understanding of the offense. And so it's good to be all in there together sometimes, but then sometimes it's just good to pull CJ out because he's very intelligent and kind of, figure out, how to, keep growing with him and teach at his level while you don't leave the other guys behind. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's been good. He can handle a lot of information, but it doesn't necessarily mean you need to be really complicated either. But he can. He sees it well. He understands it. He has really good suggestions. He has a good thought process. Getting to the point where, I'll go into a drive and ask him what he thinks. Not that we're always going to do that, but it's always good to hear what he's thinking. And we have a lot of good back and forth. I mean, we were in a scrimmage that day. It was in the red zone, and he came over to me and suggested a play. We did it and scored. you know, and I think that's when you're starting to feel like that. And I think that's a part of play calling and being on the same page with the quarterback, because when you're in those meetings and you're talking about these things, when that play is called, you know exactly why it's been called, because we talked about it in meetings, and so you're on the same page. And I think that's you know, hopefully pays off again this year.
And one other quickie, the fact that Notre Dame went against Jim Knowles' defense, the 4-2-5, in the bowl game, even though he wasn't there, still pretty much a similar defense.
Yep.
Is that giving y'all a little bit of an advantage, you think, from a preparation standpoint, to see how they sort of tried to attack it, or are there, you know, just what's your account, what's your take on that?
I don't know. I mean, you know, they were on offense, and Oklahoma State was on defense, so I don't know if it gives an advantage to one side or the other. But yeah, I mean, it's unique that you know, you'd end with the bowl game against those two sides, and then here we are in the first game. But I don't know exactly what that means, but certainly there's a lot of film to watch.
Thanks. Got time for just a couple more. Front row middle, Bill Rabinowitz, Columbus Dispatch.
Brian, doesn't seem like there are a lot of position battles left. I mean, there are. Did you come out of camp getting accomplished what you needed to? What questions do you still have?
Yeah, I mean, the three things that we wanted to get done was toughness, discipline, and skill. I think we got tougher. We practiced really hard, really hard. I think sometimes to the point where the guys were looking at me a little sideways, and we kept bringing out the ones. There were a couple of those scrimmages, but their attitudes were excellent. They just kept coming, and so I think we checked that box. I think we got tougher this preseason, and it was well done by everybody. You know, discipline of sleeping, discipline of recovery, discipline of learning your plays, and understanding assignments and those type of things. I think we checked that box. And the last one was skill. Do we get better at what we do? And I think we did that as well. So I mean, those were the three areas in those first 17 practices that we wanted to get done. And so we're not going to stop at those this week, but you know, I think we've made some progress in those areas. And like you said, you know, guys have kind of, you know, established themselves, which is good to see. Because like we talked about last year, we didn't really have that. You know, you had a bunch of guys playing, but you didn't really know what you had. I think we have a better idea of what we have going into this first game this year.
And you mentioned Kyle before. Safe to say he is your backup.
Yeah, you know, we haven't really talked about all that. We're still kind of in camp and working through that, but I think he's had a very good camp, and you know, he's going to be ready to play in that first game. You know, I mean, he's got to have that approach, and we'll talk more about that probably later in the week with those guys.
And right behind Bill, Doug Langmaurice, Cleveland.com.
Brian, when you were talking about Brian Hartline and the bigger picture stuff, what kind of responsibility does a head coach have to develop their assistant coaches, not only for how it helps your program, but for how it will help their careers down the line, even if that means at some point leaving the place like Ohio State?
No, I think it's a good point. I think that's important. I do. I think that's part of, you know, in this profession, you want to have an impact on people. And I think about the coaches that I worked for and played for, they did that for me. So I think it's important. And, you know, I think that there are some young guys who are here now, who have gone on, who have done good things, and that are really good coaches. So yeah, I mean, we try to do that the best we can. And it isn't just the full-time guys. You know, we have graduate assistants, we have interns, analysts, you know, those types of people, people in recruiting, people in creative media, you know, and it's a competitive environment out there. And, you know, I think most of the people who have left this program have gone on to be successful, and we take a lot of pride in that.
You've talked about, I think, during the course of camp, just needing to be able to run the ball when the defense knows you're going to run the ball. Just the progression of that. When you have a 3rd and 1 against Notre Dame, where are you in where you think you need to be in being able to pick up that 3rd and 1?
Yeah, I mean, we've made good progress. I like where our line is. I like where our tight ends are. I like where the running backs are at, and that's going to be important. Yeah, for sure. But I think that you know, we've worked at it, and you know, the proof will be in the pudding. We play on September 3rd.
And when you were talking about CJ's growing knowledge and all of this, philosophically, do you have an idea of how much you would be willing to sort of give a quarterback in a game of like, hey, sort of maybe take this and run a little bit, and not call all the plays, but have more responsibility, not just checks, but maybe like what? Do you have an idea of that? Do you want to not put too much on a college quarterback, and where are you with CJ in that progress?
No, it's a probably an hour conversation, but I think that's, I know you got time,
Where to be?
But I think that, you know, there are times where, you know, you try to figure that out in preseason, where you put a bunch on them, and all of a sudden looks at you, it kind of gives you one of those looks, and all of a sudden you just take it all back, you know, you just, but I think that's the fun part of having a second-year quarterback and a third guy in your third year in your program, and that it's fun because, you know, he can handle a lot of information, but then, and sometimes you just gotta go play the game. We can't make it overcomplicated, but he can take a lot on, he can, but I think that's the balance as a quarterback coach and a coordinator is, you know, when is too much, when he's starting to worry about all those things where he can't just play the game. Because even the most basic play, you know, if you're not thinking about much, you know, you're gonna see that play a lot cleaner than if you're worried about changing the play, changing the protection, all those types of things. Now you can get your eyes on the coverage and some of the things that maybe, you know, situation in the game, what's he down the distance, you know, how much time on the clock, I mean, what is the defense coordinator thinking, as opposed to, I gotta make this check, or I gotta make this, you know, change in the protection. So, you know, a lot of those things come into play, and finding that right balance of what gives us a competitive advantage and what allows them to play fast and clear is important, and something that, you know, we keep a close eye on.
Great. Coach, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
Coach,